Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will continue telling you the story of James and Diep. While the family relationship grew increasingly distant, Mr. Huan's health quietly began to decline. At first, it was only a persistent dry cough, coughing in the mornings, coughing even during meals. At times, the coughing became so intense that he had to turn his face away, afraid others might see the exhaustion he tried so hard to conceal. Mr. Huan began to feel tightness in his chest. The familiar steps he had taken for years suddenly felt heavier. Climbing just a few stairs was enough to make him stop, draw in a deep breath, and steady himself. Nighttime was the hardest. There were nights when he lay facing the wall, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in the dark. His breathing grew labored, his chest constricted, as if the air itself were no longer enough to fill his aging lungs. Yet the next morning, he still woke early, still dressed neatly, still maintained the rigid, unyielding appearance, as if weakness had never touched him. Eventually, Mr. Huan decided to see a doctor. Alone, without telling his wife, without calling his son. When the doctor read the results, Mr. Huan froze. Pleural effusion, immediate hospitalization required. In that moment, he remained silent for a long time. He asked no further questions. He simply nodded and signed the admission papers, his handwriting noticeably slower than usual. Mr. Huan called Mrs. Huan after he was already standing at the hospital entrance. His voice remained calm, brief, just as it always was. "I have to go on a business trip for a few days." On the other end of the line, Mrs. Huan hesitated. "So suddenly? Why didn't you say anything earlier?" Mr. Huan was silent for a few seconds. Then he replied with a short, clipped answer. "There's something I need to take care of." No further explanation, no chance for her to ask more. He ended the call, tightened his grip on the phone, picked up his bag, and walked inside. In the stark white hospital room, Mr. Huan lay down on the bed, his eyes fixed on the cold ceiling above. The steady, mechanical beeping of the heart monitor echoed through the room, dry and relentless. Each beat seemed to stretch the silence even longer. For the first time in his life, he lay there, without status, without power, with no one standing behind him, waiting for orders, just an aging man facing illness and the passage of time. And yet, even in this moment of frailty, his mind did not rest. He thought of James, he thought of Diep, and deep inside him, one resolve remained unchanged. When he returned home, no matter the cost, he would still stop that marriage. Illness might weaken his body, but the stubbornness within him had not retreated in the slightest. At the same time, James and Diep returned home. The house was as quiet as ever. Everything remained exactly where it had always been, as if nothing unusual had happened. But Diep was the first to sense that something was wrong, not because the house felt empty, but because of a vague, unsettling feeling, as if something were being hidden. Her gaze stopped at the living room table. Amid the scattered papers, a stack of documents had slipped out of a briefcase, lying slightly askew to one side. Diep bent down and picked them up. She had only skimmed the first few lines when her expression changed. The patient's name was James's father. Medical records. Diep tightened her grip on the papers, her heart pounding faster than usual. She said nothing, only quietly handed the file to James. James froze. He took the documents and read them line by line, slowly, carefully, as if afraid that reading any faster might make the truth too cruel to bear. Hospital admission, urgent monitoring. His father was in the hospital, alone. Without wasting another minute, James immediately called his mother. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Huan went silent when she heard the truth. She blamed herself for trusting her husband too easily, blamed herself for not paying closer attention to the lingering coughs, the moments of exhaustion he had tried so hard to hide behind a calm facade. Her voice trembled with worry and fear. The three of them hurriedly left the house, heading straight for the hospital, carrying with them a truth that none of them were ready to face. The three of them hurried into the hospital, their minds in turmoil. James went ahead, with Diep and Mrs. Huan following behind, the cold white hallway lights reflecting off faces drawn tight with tension. James kept asking the nurses, asking the on-duty doctors, his voice more urgent than usual, driven by a single need: to find out where his father was. Brief answers, hasty gestures pointing down corridors, footsteps that were almost running along the long hallways, stretching time until each second felt unbearably slow. After a while, they stopped in front of a door left slightly ajar. On it was written Mr. Huan's name. James gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. In the room, Mr. Huan lay motionless on the hospital bed, his body still bearing the marks of a surgery that had just ended. His face was pale, his lips dry. Thin tubes ran across his chest, connected to machines emitting a steady, rhythmic sound. The man who had once been strict, unyielding, always standing at the highest place in the family, now lay there, silent and fragile, so vulnerable that it made one afraid to even breathe too loudly. Mrs. Huan froze in place, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the bed as tears spilled out, words failing her completely. James stepped closer, studying his father's face carefully. Inside him rose a wave of pain he had never known before. Diep stood behind them, quietly lowering her head, her gaze resting on that frail figure, her heart tightening with an ache she could not name. In that moment, no one spoke. Only silence filled the room. And for the first time, all three of them realized that this man, no matter how strong and unyielding he had once been, could not defeat illness, nor time itself. After a long while, Mr. Huan stirred slightly. His eyelids trembled, then slowly opened. His gaze was still unfocused, as if he hadn't yet realized where he was, only patches of white light spreading unevenly across the ceiling above. But when his eyes settled on James, sitting beside the bed, the hollowed face softened just a little. The familiar sharpness was gone. So was the guarded, confrontational look. What remained was simply a father who had just endured intense pain, too exhausted to hold on to the rigidity he once wore so naturally. James leaned closer. He didn't say a word. He only quietly took his father's hand, a slow but firm grip, as if trying to pass along whatever warmth he still had left. In that moment, the room seemed to grow even quieter. There was only the steady hum of the machines and Mr. Huan's heavy, labored breathing. Then the hospital room door opened softly. Diep stepped inside, very gently, as if afraid that even the slightest sound might shatter the fragile stillness. Almost immediately, Mr. Huan's expression changed. The softness in his eyes faded, replaced once again by coldness. He turned his face away, refusing to look at her directly. His weak voice followed, hoarse, brief, yet still carrying his ingrained severity. "What are you doing here?" The question fell into the room like a heavy object. The air sank at once. James froze, his hand clasping his father's a little tighter. Mrs. Huan stood behind them, silent, tears welling up, but no words able to escape. Only Diep remained still where she was, not stepping forward, not retreating. She quietly accepted the averted gaze, her heart aching, yet understanding all too clearly that the road to being accepted was still a very long one. Diep remained standing where she was, not taking a single step forward. She didn't defend herself. She didn't rush to explain or try to soften the tension tightening by the second. Her eyes lowered briefly, hiding the emotions rising inside her, yet her face held a rare, steady calm. Not a single tear fell, even though the cold words spoken moments earlier had struck straight at her most vulnerable place. Diep bowed her head politely to Mr. Huan, the gesture slow and respectful. Then she quietly placed the basket of fruit on the small table beside his hospital bed. Every movement was so gentle it barely made a sound, as if she feared her very presence might cause him more discomfort. Deep down, Diep understood clearly. Some prejudices are rooted too deeply to be erased by a single explanation or a few small gestures. Some wounds must be endured, even when one has done nothing wrong. And in this moment, silence, to her, was the only way to preserve a fragment of dignity for both sides. But James's mother could no longer remain silent. She turned toward her husband, her hands trembling, caught between anger and heartbreak. Her voice faltered, yet she forced each word to come out clearly. "You're lying here alone, hiding everything from the family, and even now you're still judging, still being this stubborn?" She paused for a breath, then continued, her voice lower but heavy with resentment. "What has that girl ever done wrong to you?" Mr. Huan did not respond. He lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, his silence rigid and unyielding. Yet each word from his wife cut quietly into the pride he had always clung to so fiercely. James stood in the middle of the room, feeling as if he were being pulled apart from both sides. For the first time in his life, unsure whether to step toward his stern father or toward the woman he had chosen to walk beside for the rest of his life. Diep lowered her head in a polite bow, then gently turned away, her steps slow as she moved toward the door. She didn't say another word. She didn't look back. In that moment, Diep thought simply that her presence was probably making the air in the room heavier, and that by leaving, everyone might be able to breathe a little easier. She stepped closer to the door, lifted her hand, and touched the ice-cold handle, ready to open it and walk away from a place that had never truly been meant for her. But just then, a hoarse voice rose behind her. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. It was broken, as if caught halfway in the throat, yet strong enough to freeze every movement in the room. "Stay." Diep stopped. Her hand remained on the door handle, completely still. She stood there with her back to the hospital bed, her heart pounding harder, unsure whether she had truly heard it right. James spun around to look at his father, shock unmistakable in his eyes. Mr. Huan was still lying there, his head turned toward the ceiling. He didn't look back, but his eyes were tightly shut, his brows faintly drawn together, as if it had taken all his strength to speak those two words. His hand clenched lightly into the bedsheet. A quiet sign of the silent struggle happening inside a man who had always been used to controlling everything. And in that very moment, James suddenly understood something he had never considered before. Behind the rigid exterior, the cold demeanor, and the decisions that had always seemed unshakable, there might be a fear his father had never admitted. A fear of losing the control he had held onto his entire life. A fear of facing the possibility that he had been wrong. And more than anything, a fear that the time he had left might no longer be long enough to fix everything he had stubbornly tried to hold on to. Was that single word, stay, nothing more than a moment of weakness from a man who had just stepped back from the edge of life and death? Or was it the first time in his life that Mr. Huan was forced to face the truth he had avoided for so many years? That rigidity can never replace love. That power cannot keep the people you love from leaving. And that when time is no longer on your side, there are things which, if left unsaid, may never have another chance to be made right. Stay with us for the next episode to discover whether this family will find their way back to understanding or continue to be torn apart by the words that were never spoken.